One.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the May 11th meeting of the Chatham Finance Committee. Pursuant to Governor Baker's June 16, 2021 signing of an act relative to the extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, including his extension of his March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. This meeting of the Chatham Finance Committee is being conducted via remote participation. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may do so by calling the phone number 508-945-4410, again 945-4410, and enter the conference ID 106-218-298, 106-218-298, followed by the pound sign. Or one may join the meeting online via Microsoft Teams through the link in the posted agenda. Despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide for real-time access, and we will post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. In accordance with town policy, the public can speak to any issue or business item on the agenda during the meeting when recognized by me, the chair. So with that out of the way, call to order. Joanne, are you with us?
Here, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. John Whalen?
Here.
Tommy Doan?
Here.
Andy Young?
Here.
John Papalardo?
Here.
And I am present. So we have a quorum, and we are finishing our work relative to fiscal year 23 article reviews, Fisherman Storage Area and Collins Center Classification Plan. So Alex, if you want to start us off with the Fisherman Storage Area, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, as you may or may not be aware, the Select Board voted on both these remaining articles last night at their regular scheduled meeting. Article 24 is the Fisherman Storage Area. The board did vote last night to recommend this article to town meeting for $200,000. In your packet, I had provided the report to the select board, which was in excess of that amount. But again, the board last night made the motion for expenses up to $200,000 by a vote of 5 in favor and none opposed. And Dr. Duncanson is here to speak to the article and present it to you.
Welcome, Bob.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the Finance Committee. So I'm sure you're all pretty familiar with what's been going on. The town has had a fisherman storage area for probably 2 to 3 decades now. It's been located on the northeast corner of the Chatham Airport property up off Wilford Road. And it was originally set up to provide a space for fishermen to store nets, pots, other equipment and whatnot, as an alternative to storing that in their backyards and potentially causing distress among their neighbors, which would then result in complaints to the town or the Board of Selectmen or whoever. Recently, the FAA, as part of their evaluation of the various ongoing activities at the airport, reviewed the fisherman storage area as part of the natural resource assessment that they did, and determined that the fisherman storage area was incompatible with airport operations because they felt that the fisherman storage area, because of the nature of the material stored there, that it could be an attractant for wildlife and waterfowl, gulls and whatnot, which clearly, don't always mesh well with aircraft. And so they directed that the fisherman storage area be closed. The airport commission subsequently obviously has authority over the airport property. They subsequently issued a notice to the town because that's the way it's currently set up in the oversight, if you will, of the impending closure of the fisherman storage area and therefore having to relocate that activity. Originally, it was going to be closed last fall. The Airport Commission did grant an extension until June 30th of this year. So at the request of the town manager, I've undertaken 3 activities over the last several months One was to have fabricated and installed a gate at the current Fisherman storage area, because one of the concerns is that there has been illegal dumping taking place there over the years. We engaged Bennett Environmental to conduct an environmental site assessment of the property to determine whether or not the various activities that had taken place there, either storage or illegal dumping, had resulted in any environmental impact to the site. And then the third one was to follow up on a recommendation that went to the Board of Selectmen last fall, when Terry Whalen undertook an evaluation of the town and looked at potential sites to relocate the Fisherman storage area to some other site, taking into account town property, abutting properties, a certain radius from the airport, and a whole slew of other things. And so the upshot of that was the recommended, or the location it looked like it might be feasible, was basically the gully area, the former soil storage area, located between the water pollution control facility and the capped landfill. There's basically a low area in there where for years the town had dumped street sweepings. And so that was identified as a potential location after an exhaustive screening process. So I hired an engineering firm after soliciting proposals to do so, to conduct an assessment to see whether or not that site in fact was feasible to use as a storage area, and what the possible cost may be. And if I can share my screen, I can quickly show you what the engineers came up with. And sorry, but I'm logged into my other screen, so let me see if I can do this just from my laptop here. Sorry, it's always easier to do it just from the laptop than also have your. All right.
So Bob, while you pull that up, I'm going to jump off because for some reason you just went up to about 20 times the original size. So I can't see anybody else. So I'm going to hang up and rejoin the meeting while you pull that up.
Okay.
Big Bob.
Okay. All right, so can everybody see a figure with the current solar farm on the landfill in the upper right and the wastewater treatment infiltration beds along the bottom?
No, I just see your screen, Bob.
No.
All right. Yeah, I'm used to doing this just from home where I only have to deal with my laptop. All right, hang on. I think I know what I need to do.
And now we see something.
Yep.
All right, now you can see the figure, hopefully.
Yep.
Okay, so this was the site. As I said, we've got the solar panels on the cap landfill at the top of the picture. We've got the infiltration beds for the wastewater treatment plant along the bottom. We have Middle Road over on the left side. And then that dark line coming in from Middle Road, that would be a new access road leading down to this gully area between the transfer station and the WPCF. And those white kind of little boxes in the middle, those are just demarcating the various plots at roughly 5,000 square foot each that the engineers were able to site within the confines of this area, given that there's a slope up to the treatment beds, and then we have the edge of the cap landfill, which is shown in blue, the blue dotted line. So as you can see, they were only able to accommodate 6 storage spaces at this site. And the price tag for that, based on the engineer's estimate, was about $370,000. So when this proposal first came in to me, I was like, $370,000 to basically build a flat area upon which, fishermen will be able to store their material, seemed extremely excessive. So I had a conversation with the engineers and I asked them, what about if we were to move it up to the flat area, up closer to Middle Road? And originally we had discounted that area because that was areas set aside in the comprehensive wastewater management plan for future infiltration beds. As we expand the sewer system, we would need more beds in which to infiltrate the water. And so we had a plan, we had a design that was all laid out to accommodate additional beds over in that area. However, when we did the CWMP, one of the things that we did was we did what's known as a hydraulic loading test at the site to determine how much water could we put into the ground without having it puddle or pond, basically. Now, DEP has a design criteria for sand infiltration beds of 5 gallons per square foot per day, and that's what you use when you size these beds. We were able to show that this particular site, because like most of Cape Cod, it's good, clean sand, we could actually infiltrate up to 40 gallons per square foot per day. So roughly 8 times higher than the DEP design criteria. So we went to DEP, we presented that information to them. They were not willing to grant us the full 40 gallons per square foot per day. However, they did approve us to design the current beds that you see in this picture based on 30 gallons per square foot per day. So we got about a 6-time higher loading rate than DEP would normally ask you to use. So on the basis of that, in talking with the engineer, that would cut down the future needs to expand additional beds as the town brings more and more sewage to the treatment plant. And we do have 2 additional beds laid out just to the north between the existing beds in Middle Road that aren't shown here, but they're on the plans. So we felt pretty confident that we could potentially use the area further to the east because we wouldn't necessarily need to set that aside totally in the future for future beds. That's not to say that at some point DEP may not ask us to go back and repeat the hydraulic loading test just to confirm everything, but we felt pretty confident that we could go ahead and potentially use that area. So on the basis of that, I asked the engineers, I said, okay, would you conceptually lay something out closer to Middle Road so that we could see what we could accommodate and what would it potentially do to the cost? So let me see if I can bring up the second slide here. I think I finally figured out how to work this with 2 screens. Hopefully everybody can see another aerial photo with a bunch of white boxes on it. Yes? No?
Yes.
We can, yep.
Okay. So this is what the engineers laid out. This is in the upper part of the road. You can see the the planned road to the lower level still cutting through the site. But the engineers up here, because it's a flatter area, if you will, and we're not confined by the landfill cap, they were able to accommodate roughly 12 plots at 5,000 square feet, much smaller access road, much smaller area. So then the next question was, okay, under this scenario, how much would the cost be? And let me show one final thing here. And as you can see on this spreadsheet, we have the original proposal at $370,000. And then the alternative proposal up closer to Middle Road would bring it down closer to $328,000. If you divide that by the number of plots at roughly 5,000 square feet each that you could get in those various scenarios, on the original scenario with 6 plots, that equates to about $62,000 per plot. And if you look at the alternative layout at 12 plots, that brings the price down to about $27,000 a plot. So this was presented to the Board of Selectmen last night. You know, as I'm sure you did, they did, as well as myself. You know, everybody was having sticker shock over this. So there was discussion about this last night. Some of the selectmen, you know, I think there's a consensus among the Board of Selectmen to continue supporting the fishing community by providing some area for primarily the guys that deal with pots, primarily the lobstermen. You know, because if you have a large number of pots, it takes up a fairly, you know, it's fairly land intensive, if you will, to store them over the winter. So the bottom line is, at the end of the discussion last night, the board voted to support this article to the tune of up to $200,000, which means we would probably be able to do the alternative proposal and accommodate 5 to 6 plots. I've asked the engineers to give me a quick ballpark analysis where I basically marked out 6 plots, the ones closest to Middle Road as well as kind of in the middle, and asked them to come up with a quick cost estimate to that to see if we are still under that $200,000 cap. The idea being we would start out with this proposal, and then if there was sufficient demand from the fishermen, the area could always be expanded to basically what was shown on that figure with roughly 12 plots. When we went to the Board of Selectmen back in March to initially discuss this, we indicated to them that we had responses from about 13 fishermen, that they were interested in, you know, some area to store their gear. So the demand seems to be there. What we don't have a good handle on right now, and this was also discussed with the board last night, is, you know, what the rate potentially would be. Right now, the fishermen pay $600 a year to rent the plots at the current storage area. Clearly, that number would have to go up under either of these, you know, cost scenarios. There was no consensus last night as to what that number may be. You know, and over what period of time potentially the town would look to recoup some cost as opposed to, you know, the fishermen paying the entire freight. But I think there was general consensus of, you know, continuing to support the fishing community and potentially subsidize the fishermen's storage area to some extent. That's still to be determined. So that's where we're at. As Alex mentioned, the board did vote to support the article 5-0 with an amount up to $200,000. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
That's very helpful, Bob. Thank you very much. Questions for Bob, Andy? I see your hands up.
Bob, I'm hearing an echo. Bob, what are the criteria for fishermen who want to store things here? Do they have to be Chatham residents? Do they have to be, you know, Antipodes Cove permanent holders? What is it?
Yeah, they do not have to be Chatham residents. That is one of the topics the board briefly touched on last night, because right now they basically just have to be a permit holder in Antipodes Cove for the fish pier or, you know, offloading at the pier. That's the primary criteria. Okay. They do not have to be Chatham residents because, as you know, we do have fishermen that operate out of the pier that are not Chatham residents. You know, there was some discussion last night about, you know, maybe going forward, this area would be restricted to Chatham residents only. Okay. So, no final decision was made.
Bob, further question. I've been up in that other area, the current storage area, a number of times over the last 20 something years. And it didn't look to me like a whole lot of effort was being made to keep the place somewhat clean and to keep down the brush and the vines and the overgrowth. I mean, I'd have a hard time telling how much was left there just because it was so overgrown. Is there any idea trying to, impose a little more requirement for that in the new spot?
Yeah, one of the things we're looking at is putting a better surface in the new area. The existing area, they basically just cleared all the trees and flattened it out. They didn't put any, we're not going to pave the site, but we are talking about on the new site, putting something like hardening down or something that would keep the vegetation down. Because, as you can imagine, if you've been there, trying to get in there to like mow it or anything is next to impossible with all the stuff stored there. So we've been looking at some kind of surface that wouldn't be expensive, but would help to keep vegetation down so we wouldn't have to deal with having the same situation we currently have.
All right, other questions for Bob? John Whalen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bob, do we have any evidence that the fishermen actually use all the stuff they store there, or are they just leaving basically refuse there, which is, it appears that way to me when I go up. I've been up there twice this spring, and or what we're calling this spring, and it doesn't look like all that equipment or that stuff is actually usable.
Honestly, it is a combination of both. Some of the things like the pots, the lobster pots, they're clearly used regularly. There's other stuff down there. And as you guys know, and I'm sure John Papalardo could chime in, the fisheries have changed over the years in Chatham, and they continue to change. That's been one of the advantages of the Chatham fleet, is they've been able to adapt as fisheries have changed over the years. And as the fisheries have changed, the gear changes. So, they may have used gear 10 years ago, and now they're doing a different fishery with a different type of gear, but they don't want to throw that old equipment away because that fishery may come back at some point. So, and clearly there's some material down there that, has fallen apart and is basically now just junk, and should be removed. And, the fishermen have been put on notice by the Airport Commission that they are responsible for, getting all the stuff that's on their plots out of there by the end of June. The town has gone in a couple of times in recent years to remove some of the clearly junk out of there. There was a big effort about 3 or 4 years ago. We got a number of dumpsters from DPW and threw out a lot of debris that clearly wasn't being used and, didn't have an owner anymore, if you will. But clearly, that needs to happen again, and will be happening at some point, probably after the June 30th deadline for the fishermen to get all their stuff out of there. And then basically anything that's left is going to the junkyard.
Joanne, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chatham is, from my point of view, as a non-fisherman, Chatham is an important port for the fishing industries for Massachusetts, from what I understand.
Yep.
And I think our fishing industry in Chatham is important to every one of us in Chatham. It's the basis of who we are. And I think to start, I'm willing to devote some money to start the effort to find an appropriate place for our fishermen or other local fishermen to place their gear, and just make sure that there is a follow-up so that we alleviate some of the problems that John and Andy were just talking about. So I would be very much in favor of at least having a start and devoting some money to a start in this kind of location and cleanup.
Thank you, Joanne. Further question, John Papalardo, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been thinking along the lines of what Joanne just had to say. Chatham does play a very important role in the commercial fisheries of Massachusetts and New England, but that doesn't mean that we should do anything or everything that the industry wants us to do. I think there needs to be some give and take here. I know in speaking to some of the fishermen about the current site, there was there were some folks were pretty upset about how that area had been treated and how that may cost the legitimate need to store gear, may cost those individuals the opportunity to take advantage of a town-sponsored program like this. I think the amended proposal, Dr. Bob, is a good one. I'm glad that the board took that moderate step and continued to show support for the industry. But at the same time, I think we need to be a little, we meaning the industry, need to be a little better about monitoring, self-policing, and maintaining a higher level of or higher standards at this new opportunity. This is a second shot at it, and it's my hopes that the town makes this investment. We get 5 slots. They're taken, they're used properly, and there's a need for more, and there's a willingness to work out an arrangement that allows some expansion. I'm glad that the area you've identified has that potential. So I would support what the selectmen supported last night to take the town meeting. I did have a question. If I'm looking at the aerial photograph that you provided in the packet and showed earlier, I'm just curious, the solar array on the landfill cap, there's a road coming out of it, and then there's a clearing, and it looks like a bunch of boats and other things are stored there. Is that town
Yes,
land?
that's actually an area where the harbor master stores stuff, and that is actually on top of an old animal landfill, if you will. When DPW used to pick up animals along the side of the road, they would dispose of them there. So that actually had to be capped as well. And that would became the harbor master's storage area. So, when they find a boat on the beach and nobody claims it, it gets stored up in there. And then every couple of years or so, we hold an auction and auction that stuff off if ultimately nobody claims it. And then, there's been some other stuff. Sometimes they store docks and all up there in the winter and stuff like that. So that's what you're seeing there. Yeah.
Okay. I did read through the proposal, the original proposal that was for, I think it was 374 or 347. I can't remember.
Yep.
And there was description of multiple layers of gating and fencing.
Yep.
That seemed to be, aside from the clearing costs and engineering and all that, that was one of the bigger ticket items. In this new proposal, or this new amended proposal, am I reading it right to think that each individual plot is going to be gated, or are there separate gates to separate the wastewater treatment plant from the harbor master from this new area? I couldn't understand the gates.
Yeah. In the new proposal, and let me share that figure again because it's easier to talk about with the figure up. Oops. Can you all see the figure?
Yep. With the white boxes.
Yeah. In this scenario, there would be one gate right at the middle road entrance. So that, and that would be keyed or a combination lock. And we haven't determined yet whether or not how that would work, whether we'd give, individual plot holders a key or whatnot, or just a combination. We'll work that out. And then if you notice along the back, there's this one plot is kind of angled. That is an existing fence that fences in the transfer station. And then along the bottom, there's an existing fence that fences in the wastewater treatment plant. So what we would do is we would simply, that yellow line that you see would be a new fence that would come out, go along Middle Road, and then back and tie into the existing fence at the landfill. Now, obviously, with the proposal that we talked about with the board last night, and I don't know if you can see my cursor moving, but we'd use the one slanted parcel that's up adjacent to Middle Road, then the one behind it, and then the 3 directly across from them. So initially, we would only fence that area in. So it would cut
Gotcha.
down the amount of fencing that would be needed.
Okay.
And we'd only have to have basically one gate at Middle Road because we wouldn't have the access road going through and tying into the access road that goes to the Harbor Master storage area, which
Yep.
currently comes in from the wastewater treatment plant site. So there'd be a significant savings in gates and fencing with this alternative option.
Okay. Well, one last, that's very helpful. One last question, if I may.
Yeah.
You made note that previously this area had been part of a long-term phased plan to potentially do infiltration sand pits.
Yep.
And you also informed us that we have really good, is it percolation or whatever the term is?
Yep.
So we're not thinking right now that we would actually need to use these for the intended plan. If something changes and we need to, we're not creating a problem by putting these areas here, right? I mean, we could unwind these areas and put sand down if we needed to.
Yeah, basically, we wouldn't have to put any sand down because basically what you do to create these sand beds is you basically scrape off all the topsoil and the top 3-4 feet until
Okay.
you get down to the good clean sand underneath. So with these proposals, we wouldn't touch any of that. We would just clear the trees and all out, level it off, and then basically put some kind of new material on top to provide that so we don't get the weeds and all growing up through it.
Okay.
So if at some point we did need to come back in and put sand beds here, we'd obviously have to relocate the Fisherman again, but we would just go in, remove that top layer of material off to get down to the sand. So it'd be relatively easy. But we're thinking at the very minimum, we wouldn't need to, we don't think we're going to have to do that at all. But until, we get the green light from DEP, but we're, with the engineer, we were probably thinking we're at least 10 or 15 years away from that need. So, yes, 10 or 15 years from now, the Fisherman may have to relocate again. But, at least it would buy us 10 or 15 years to potentially find another site or work something out even better.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, any further questions from the committee? Bob, I noted in the spreadsheet you had posted something referred to as storage area grading / restoration. Is that restoration relative to the existing FSA?
No, that is all relative to the new site.
Okay, is the $200,000 include, I thought your expression that some of the gear there was no longer had an owner was appropriate. I was up there a couple of weeks ago with Mike Ryder from the Harbor Master's office and the chairman of the Airport Commission. And I think your characterization is generous. I think there's a lot of gear there that no longer has an owner. Does the 200 include remediating that site?
I don't have
current site, to be clear.
I don't have a definitive answer for you. We'd like to think that that this new site will not cost the full 200,000. Some of that will be available to remediate the existing site, remove the debris. There's been some talk that maybe the Airport Commission should have some responsibility for funding cleanup at the other site. I know those discussions haven't fully taken place yet. And, until the Fishermen are all theoretically out of there at the end of June, we won't have a good idea of how much is left. We do know who's responsible on paper, at least,
right,
for each one of those plots. And so, they'll be followed up with saying, hey, you need to remove all your stuff. But, at the end of the day, there is going to be material that the town, either through this or the Airport Commission, is going to have to pay to remove.
right.
Okay. But we just don't know what that number may be yet.
Okay, that's helpful. My understanding from, I guess, the Harbor Master's office is that there are currently 3 active users, really 2, but kind of 2.5 active users, 2 lobstermen, and somebody's got some dredges up on the right-hand side when you first come in.
Yep.
Is there a reason why we're thinking about 5 sites if we only have 3 active users now? Is it relative to that 13 figure that you established? Is it just to create some overage in case there's more demand in the future?
Yeah, the latter, really. I mean, we know we have, it's 2 to 3 lobstermen that need to use the area. But as I said, we did have 13 fishermen in total that expressed interest. Now, the other thing that comes into play here is, an individual fisherman may not need 5,000 square feet. So one of the things we were proposing to do to demarcate the individual plots, at least, was to basically use what's called bin blocks, which are basically, they're made by concrete companies with kind of the leftover mix, if you will.
Yep.
So that, if somebody said, I don't need 5,000, I only need 2,500, we can actually place those dividers and split one into two. So it really depends on, I just picked 5 because it was kind of an easy rectangle on the alternate plan.
Yep.
And it gave us a little bit of additional space if there was more demand and, that we knew right off the bat.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. A little bit of morbid curiosity, but what does the EPW do with the dogs they find on the side of the road these days?
To be honest with you, I don't know. I just know that this area was closed and capped under DEP regulations when we did the whole landfill. So I don't know what they're doing with them today.
Yeah, a little bit of a trivia question. All right. Any further questions from the committee? If not, I'll take a motion. And I guess, Alex, we're going to do this relative to the $200,000 that the selectmen approved since it's their warrant.
Yes, it's 200,000.
Okay, so I'll take a motion.
So moved.
For the okay, is there a second?
Second.
All right, Joanne, please.
Yes.
John Whalen,
Yes.
Tommy Doan,
Yes.
Andy Young,
Yes.
John Papalardo,
Yes.
and the chair's in favor, 6-0. All right, thank you,
Hey,
Bob.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Alex, I guess over to you for the Collins Center new scale conversation.
Yes, this is the last warrant article, which you'll have to vote on.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, and excuse me, Alex, before we
Joanne.
move on.
Yep.
I was just looking for how is that going to be funded, Alex? That article,
the Fisherman storage and/or the Collins Center.
the fisherman storage.
Fisherman storage is going to be funded through free cash, and we had the the $200,000 placeholder in our calculations.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so moving forward, the Collins Center Classification and Compensation Plan, Article 14. The Select Board voted to place this on the warrant, and they heard it last night at their meeting to fund this classification compensation plan at a sum of $150,000, which would be raised through the tax levy, because this would be an ongoing cost. And just some background on this, in your packet, I did provide the agenda report. So back in, I believe, 2018, 2019, we had a grant from the Collins Center to do a classification and compensation schedule for all non-public safety employees, specifically the Chatham Municipal Employees Association, the Chatham Managers Association, as well as the Personnel Policies employees. So what we did was that sort of came to a halt, and we've never been able to implement the revised classification compensation plan, going over all the job descriptions with the different collective bargaining units. So we've resumed this with negotiations with the CMEA, and we're still in negotiations to get a successor agreement with the CMEA and CMA. However, we thought that getting the Collins Center Classification Compensation Plan at least funded and up and running would be an important step to both retain employees and attract new employees. It's a very competitive job market right now, and we've had retirements as well as towns are sort of poaching from one another. As one person leaves one town, then I'll look to the other Cape towns. So what this does, it takes the 2 existing scales, what we call the old scale, which has 9 grades with 8 steps, and the new scale, which is also a very old scale, has 15 grades with 9 steps, and replaces both those existing scales with what we're calling the Collins scale, which has 9 grades with 15 steps. So if you have a position that's at a certain grade, you have now 15 steps to move up that grade rather than getting maxed out after just 9 steps or 8 steps as the existing scales have. And we think that that's important to retain employees because you'll continue to see a 2% increase between those steps. And it's important also to note that employees do not get a step increase without a satisfactory performance appraisal. So you have to have your performance review has to be satisfactory before you move through those steps. So we wanted to get this funded at the annual town meeting rather than having to wait for the implementation. At least we'll have the funds available so we can implement as soon as the unions come to some agreement. And that's really what I have to say is, again, funded through the tax levy. We've programmed it in there. So we're looking at, again, the 1.14% increase to the levy based on this year's valuations. However, that will, and this is breaking news, that will be lessened by the fact that we received the first payment from the Cape Cod Islands Water Protection Fund, which will be used to fund debt service next year. So that $615,000 will actually cause us to have a flat tax rate at this time, which will be noted at town meeting on Saturday. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Alex. Questions from the committee?
Mr. Chairman?
Joanne, please.
Thank you, Alex. Yes, one of my two major questions are, of course, the unions have to approve, even though we want to appropriate the money now, just in case the unions do approve it, but they do have to approve this, right?
Yeah, we are in negotiations with the unions, but again, we want to have this in here so when we do come to an agreement, we don't have to wait to fund it and get everyone on the new scale, implement the new scale. We think that that's really important.
And so why doesn't it not apply to the public safety positions?
At the time when this was started, it was just for the non-public safety employees. However, we do have the local municipal growth factor, which is based on our local economy. That has been, for FY 2023, that's a 3% increase. And we looked at the non-public safety scales to see where we were relative to other towns surrounding us, as well as, even off the Cape a little bit, to make sure that we're competitive so we can retain and employ, and hire new employees. The public safety ones, and we routinely review all the scales, looking at our surrounding neighborhood and surrounding towns to make sure that we are competitive. And public safety has been competitive. Those scales are competitive as far as, our wage scales.
So thank you, Mr. Is there any thought of in the future the public safety being included, or as you're thinking right now, they always do, they do now and always will be competitive to other surrounding?
We hope that they're competitive, and I can tell you right now the public safety unions do their own review of what they consider competitive, so they know right where they're at in regards to surrounding towns.
And just one more comment, Mr. Chairman. Alex, did you announce the final tax rate a minute ago?
No, I did not announce it. I just did say, though, that we received the first payment from the Cape Cod Islands Water Protection Fund, and I had to check with the Department on Revenue on how they wanted us to account for that. And they wanted to be reserved on my balance sheet for debt service, which would then we'll transfer that money out at town meeting to fund the debt service payment. So that lessens the amount that we have to raise through the taxation. And I just ran the numbers. So it looks like we will, based on FY 2022 values, have a flat tax rate, or most likely a little dip in the tax rate based on the 2022 values. However, we do expect values to go up.
And when you say a flat tax rate, you're saying a 4 point, may we have the numbers, please?
Hold on just
per
a minute.
thousand.
This is breaking news, so.
Okay, but it's, I like to hear any of your breaking tax news.
Yeah, hold on just a minute, let me just pull that up. I just ran the numbers right before the meeting, so. That would look like, at this time, don't quote me,
No, no.
I always say, but I am on, it looks like a decrease of 2 cents. So from $4.62 to $4.60, based on the FY 2022 revenues. If
And
everything is,
And bear with me just one more minute. And does that mean when our whole, when we've gone through town meeting, all of the articles so far?
Yeah. yes, that's if everything is approved as presented right now.
All right, thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Joanne. John Whalen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been thinking about our payment schedule for town employees differently, perhaps, than anyone else. I know that in certain areas of the country, payment schedules are relative to the cost of housing in that specific town, as opposed to the next town over where housing costs may be significantly less. I have the feeling that since the housing costs in Chatham are so great, virtually everybody we hire has to live somewhere else. There's just no housing availability and the costs are beyond them. So I wonder if perhaps factoring into this at some point, we should start thinking about the payment schedule as a comparison relatively with the housing costs in this town itself. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Alex, any comment on that?
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it, and I made a note of it because again, we're always trying to look ways to retain our current employees as well as fill our vacant positions, and it's a very competitive market right now on the Cape as well as off Cape. Recently we've lost our town planner to work for the state. She's now working from home and only has to go into the office 2 days a month, and that's hard to compete with as well.
Thank you, Alex. Further questions? So Alex, sorry,
just one more
please.
question.
Yep,
One more question, Mr. Chairman. No, I lost my train of thought. Never mind, go ahead.
All right, we'll come back to you in a second. Alex, you mentioned there's, I guess, a 2% bump with each step increase, which is predicated on a satisfactory review.
Yes.
Is there a rough number or a specific number of what percentage of employees get satisfactory reviews? Is that a high bar to clear, or everybody get 2% a year, basically?
It's, every department head is different the way that they, score their employees. We do have 5 different ratings. It's consistently above satisfactory, often above satisfactory, satisfactory, often below satisfactory, and then the not satisfactory. So again, there's 3 different ratings that you can get, and I believe most employees do get satisfactory or above. It's very, it's not often that there's a non-satisfactory, because what we try to do as department heads, and I think most of us would try to address the situation before you get to the annual review. So then you have a guide and a performance improvement plans to meet those goals, and then get a satisfactory review. We put a lot of time and effort into training employees. We want to retain them.
Yep, understood. Is each position, municipal position, assigned a grade, and you just work up to your maximum now 15 steps, and then you're capped out, or can you graduate to the next grade after 15 steps?
Yeah, that's what this classification study did, was looked at the different types of jobs and then put them into each grade based on the functions and the duties, level of confidentiality, level of risk to the town. If you're the treasurer collector probably has a lot of risk, the assessor does. A lot of people do have a lot of risk. So again, it's that level. Depending on, and this is where we looked at the different jobs, and there, with 15 grades, there was quite a number of grades, and it's now being compressed to just the 9 grades based on those different duties and job descriptions. So yes, you can max out at the end. However, then each year the compensation scale is updated based on that local municipal growth factor namely how well did Chatham do on certain areas, the motor vehicle excise tax, hotel motel, those, I think there's like 6 different items in there.
Okay, so you just touched on my third question, which is the local growth factor is not just for public safety employees?
All the unions have adopted that
All
factor.
unions.
Yep.
Okay. All right, Joanne, your hands up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alex, does this retain longevity, or does this new program no longer have longevity as a part of it?
Yeah, longevity is a separate compensation under the collective bargaining agreements, so that remains the same as it has been.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Joanne. All right, seeing no further questions, and if there are no further questions, then I'll take a motion to adopt Article 14, the Collins Center Classification Plan.
So moved.
And
Second.
a second. Thank you, Joanne. So, Joanne Sprague.
Oh, yes.
Okay, didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Yes.
John Whalen,
Yes.
Tommy Doan,
Yes.
Andy Young,
Yes,
John Papalardo,
Yes.
and I'm in favor. 6-0, Alex.
Thank you.
And in case anyone's wondering, the Boy Scouts reached an accord with the town, so the tent camping article has been withdrawn.
Correct.
So we're off that tightrope.
Yeah, so
good.
yeah, you've now voted on every single article that will be presented to town meeting.
So the champagne corks can fly. Nice work, everybody. Alex, you've got annual town meeting discussion on our
I
agenda.
have that, and I also have minutes. I don't know, we did send out the minutes. I don't know if we're ready to.
Yeah, and that was a fail on my part. I had to run up to Boston unexpectedly yesterday, so I did not get to the minutes. I'll circulate them, and I think what we'll do is probably just call a brief meeting before town meeting to approve all this.
Okay,
Would be my thinking.
all right.
30% chance of rain beginning at 7 a.m. in from 3 p.m. We have a little bit of a shift in the weather report. Everybody's got their speaking assignments,
Yes.
and I think we should be good to go.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I think I had this on here. As you may or may not be aware, the moderator is suggesting a consent calendar for town meeting,
Thank you.
where he has bundled articles for which there are unanimous votes, both by the select board, the finance committee, and or the CPA and planning board if necessary. So that is hoping to get rid of, I think, about 23 articles in one vote. Articles such as, prior year bills, the revolving funds, the enterprise fund, not the airport revolving fund, but the other revolving funds are all on there. So it's articles that you've seen previously. A lot of the CPA articles are on there, except for the one that did not have any unanimous vote. So that's hoping to speed things up for town meeting and just disperse of those in one vote.
And just for everyone's reference, Alex, I don't know if you've seen it, but I amended the scorecard with the finance committee speakers and highlighted in yellow on the spreadsheet those articles that could prospectively be included in the consent calendar. I want to remind everybody that you're not necessarily off the hook in case somebody objects to the inclusion of any of the proposed consent calendar items. The finance committee member will still have to speak to any of those. So we should be on guard.
Yeah, and as you are aware, our charter calls for the finance committee vote to be enumerated before each, or to give your vote right before all the articles. And then we do have the articles that the votes aren't recorded for in the warrant. So.
All right. So anything further? Joanne, your hands up, please.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just to make it easier when we vote on these minutes, there's the minutes of March the 9th. It shows me as being absent. It doesn't show me in the present column, but I believe I was there, nor does it show me in the absent column. I can't remember being absent, so maybe Ann needs to check that again.
Okay, we can look into that.
March 9th.
Thank you for that.
Look at that.
John Whalen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This perhaps is my ignorance or lack of awareness, but who pays for the damages and repairs that are taking place at the town hall? Who is responsible for that? It appears that the power company caused the damage with a power surge that they instigated as opposed to anything we did. Who pays for that repair?
Well, that's a good question. Right now, I'm hoping to get the invoices to get a good idea of how much it's going to cost. Again, the electricians have been there all last week and most of this week. I expect them to be there, and as well as our HVAC contractors have been there too. So it's going to be quite a hefty bill coming in. So first of all, we've reported to our insurance agent. So we do have a $25,000 deductible that we'll have to pay. However, we will go after Eversource and seek reimbursement for any and all damages.
Okay. One further thing, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
And I was away, so I'm not sure I know, but how was it determined that the town paid the damages caused by Eastwood homes on Joshua Jethro Road? I don't remember that we ever voted on that expense, and it sounds like it's been paid.
The repairs on Joshua Jethro were to the road drainage. So again, it was in our right of way. So they've upgraded it, and that was paid through by Chapter 90 funds.
But is the contractor in some way, he certainly was in some way responsible. Was he ever assessed any costs?
I know there was discussion, but no assessment has been made yet.
Okay.
Is there going to be further discussion? That's a very interesting point that John raises. Is the case closed?
I'm not
Okay.
sure. I'd have to check with the DPW director was and town council, I believe, met with the homeowner who was flooded. I'd have to go back and review, but again, we just upgraded our drainage system, the existing drainage system. So I don't know what's happened since then.
Okay, yeah, it might be something for us to look into. John Papalero, I think your hand was up next.
Yeah, thanks. Just looking for a little guidance on, I do have my speaking assignments. One of the items that I'm speaking to is the citizens petition on the purchase of the what do you call it? The swim club. The finance committee voted 061 on that. But how much detail do I need to offer the town beyond the finance committee didn't think it was a good use of money to purchase? I mean, should I go back through minutes and look for rationale and offer rationale?
No, I don't think that's necessary. And Mr. Chair, I'm sorry if I'm just jumping in, but I think because the select board had authorized the feasibility study to see if it's a prudent move to go forward with the purchase. So they have the 50,000 under Article 30. And again, I'm not sure if the petitioner, had actually requested that when they met before the select board. I haven't heard whether the petitioner is going to still present that article, or if it will be discussed with the feasibility study. But I would just probably state the finance committee vote and the fact that that the finance committee supported the feasibility study before wanting to take a positive or any action really on this article.
Okay, thank you.
And I think, John, just to add that, I think we all know the moderator's preferences. We provide a little bit of color for our thinking. And not strictly just limit ourselves to the vote, but we can certainly chat offline about that if we need to. All right, Joanne, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Alex, back to the problem with the drainage and the overflow. Don't builders have to post a bond with the town when they're building? from my memory, when I was a selectman in Walpole years ago, we had the ability to pull a bond if there was something left undone that should have been done with either building or what had happened in the road in front of it as a result of what the builder did. And I remember we did it.
I think that, the certificate of occupancy was issued. Everything was fine. We then had this really torrential rainstorm that caused the flooding. I don't think it was just one, I think, it wasn't every rainstorm. It was something that really, I think we had 4 inches of rain in, an hour or something that caused the flooding at that time. So because our drains and the town drains on that road couldn't handle that. And whether that had something to do with the new building and the raising of the property. And again, I'm not that well versed in this, but that it could have, and whether that did or not, that's for other people to decide. But I think that the certificate of occupancy was issued based on that, and I think then the bond is usually released once the CO is issued.
Okay, thank you.
John Whalen, please.
Yeah, just to follow up on what Joanne said, if you believe the testimony of the aggrieved homeowner in the Chronicle, who said that in the prior 10 years, this had not happened until Eastwood Homes did the work. So their implication is that Eastwood Homes is at least at part responsible for the problem.
Yeah, and we're aware of that. I know that I spoke to the homeowner when it first happened. So, and again, because it had never happened before, it could be a contributing factor to this, obviously. But again, I think that I don't know what how to proceed on this. So,
Do we know what the cost was?
For our Chapter 90, I'd have to go back and look. I might have it. Hold on.
And John, while Alex looks for that figure, I think one thing I might do is just reach out to Tom Temple and get his take on it. It's an interesting question that you pose, certainly.
I do not have that right now, but I can see if I can get it for you, and I'll send it to you, to the committee.
That'd be great. Thank you, Alex. Okay, anything further? If not, and unless I am mistaken, and I wish I were mistaken, but I have the unfortunate opportunity to announce that John Whalen is stepping down from the Finance Committee after 12 years of dutiful service.
So
John,
sorry to hear that.
Yes, indeed. I'm sure we all share that, Joanne. John was appointed to the Finance Committee in June of 2010. There was a rumor at the time that he's bullied into it by Coley Yaw, but that was never confirmed. John has a lengthy history of service to the town, served on the Chatham Historic Commission, the Erosion Advisory Committee, the Cable Advisory Committee, the Chatham Cultural Council, Chatham Preservation Awards Committee. He has additionally served in several clubs here in town, and was one of the founders of the Chatham Harbor Run. So John has a lengthy and active history of civic engagement for which we as a town are certainly all better served. So John, it's been a real pleasure. We're certainly going to miss you. The history that you bring to the conversation, your awareness of the town and its issues. I wish we could convince you otherwise, but I understand it's time to put your feet up. So thank you very much for all the service and all the effort.
Hear,
Thank you
hear.
very much, Mr.
Thank
Chairman.
you.
So with that, I'm going to ask John if you would like to propose that we adjourn.
Yes, I move that we adjourn. Thank you.
Second.
Now, if we don't second it, John, I don't think can formally resign. So Tommy, you still want to go forward with that?
Yeah, I'll withdraw that then.
All right, I'll second it in John's honor. So Joanne,
Yes,
John Whalen,
Yes.
Tommy,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
John Papalardo.
Yes.
And the chair is reluctantly in favor of adjourning John's last meeting.
Thanks,
Thank you very
John.
much, John.
Well done, John.